Hi everybody, this is Mona. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today we are on day 3 of 4 for the IMA for Beginners series, and we're going to be going over some different IMA features. So I am recording today's webinar, and I will send out that link later today, and I sent out the PowerPoint Monday evening, I believe. So if you don't have that, just send me a note and I'll send it back out to you. So if you could do me a favor, I'd like you to test out the chat feature. If you can hear me and see the presentation, please answer the following questions. Have you ever reviewed the Changes tab to determine your item's location in the IMA workflow? Yes or no? And then how do you typically do change requests? Do you sync changes? Do you use the Changes grid? Do you use manual edit? Or maybe you've never created one before. So again, have you reviewed the Changes tab to determine your item's location? And how do you typically do change requests? And I'll come back and look at these in a couple of slides. So I went ahead and put everybody on mute because someone did not have their microphone on mute yesterday, and it was pretty distracting, and the beginning of the call was already a lot of background noise going on. So I just went ahead and put everybody on mute. At the end of the presentation, I will unmute the call so that if you want to audibly ask any questions, you can. Otherwise, you can use the chat feature at any time during the presentation to ask questions. Please be sure to send it to all participants. If you just send it to the presenter, I may not see it until the very end. Excuse me. All right, so I asked a couple of questions. Have you ever reviewed the Changes tab to determine your item's location? And most people have not. We do actually have one that has, so that's really good. A lot of people aren't aware of the Changes tab and what it can tell you. And then the second question I had was, how do you typically do change requests? And it looks like most people have never done a change request before. So this is going to go over a couple of options of how you can do change requests. Tomorrow we will be getting more into specific change requests that you can do and how to do those. All right, so just as a recap, Monday we talked about basics and terminology. Yesterday was all about setting up new items on the new item grid. Today we're doing IMA features, and then tomorrow, like I said, we're going to be focusing on some very specific change requests, such as adding new cartons, updating shipments, updating dimensions, and so forth. So today, the purpose of this session is to provide an overview of features within IMA that may be required to manage your items. So after completing this session, you will be able to identify all locations of an item in the IMA workflow, explain how to access and approve returned items and pending change requests that require vendor approval, demonstrate how to use the Changes grid, and identify errors that result during the syncing process. So topics, we're going to cover Quick Search and Changes tab and the Returned Items task list. Here you can see, if you hover over the data catalog in the menu, you'll see new items first, and that's what we covered yesterday. So today we're also covering this returned items, the change existing items, and data catalog notifications. And then again, grid history we covered yesterday. Then if you hover over task list, we are going to be covering the general task list today as well. All right, so first up is the Quick Search and Changes tab. The Quick Search provides a summary of basic information and workflow status for a single KSN. It's the fastest method to find out what role your item is in and if it has completed the process to become operational. So most of you have probably done a quick search if you've been in IMA at all. That's usually one of the first things people tend to do. To use quick search, you use the drop-down to select the criteria that you want to search for. As a vendor, the 3 options that you will most likely use would be KSN, core item number if you're Sears, and then UPC. The other ones you probably won't use as a vendor. What's really nice is whenever you select a criteria option, it actually updates the example under the criteria field here. So here it gives KSN, and in the example you can see that they did leave off the dash and the check digit. So if you were to include that dash and check digit when you search, it's not going to come back with any search results. So this example can help you make sure that you're entering the information in the correct format. So when you do a quick search, you will always see the status right here. The status for this one is existing. And then for next steps, it's actually blank because this item is existing. So this means that we can actually order this item. Some other things you will always see on this quick search screen, you will see your KSN number right here. If it's a series item, you will see the core item number to the right of that. You will also see the SHC hierarchy located right here. At the bottom of the screen, there's a graphical depiction of where your item is in the workflow process. So workflow rows can refer to any of those manual rows. You may remember on Monday we went over the different workflow rows that an item goes through as it gets set up in IMA. So it starts with the vendor, then goes to the merchant, which is your buyer, inventory analyst, and then supply chain. And those are the manual rows. And then it moves on to hold state, bridging, and operational, which are fully automated. Whenever it gets through one of these rows down here, the box will go blue and it will say complete. Here in this example, you can see it's green because it's still in process in the workflow rows, and it does have the date that it first entered that row. Hold state, bridging, and operational, they are not filled in with a color, and they say not reached yet. Up here with status, it says that it's in process. Under next steps, it says that it's currently in the vendor row. Please contact the vendor for approval. So this example, the status says existing changes pending. And we can see that it's currently in one of our workflows row. Under next steps, it says it's in workflow row. And then down here at the graphic at the bottom, the workflow rows box is green. Hold state and bridging are not filled in because they're just going to have to go back through hold state and bridging. But the operational box is blue, so we know that this item has been operational. Maybe we've had orders out on it, maybe we haven't. But at this point, there's some sort of change that's pending within IMA. One of the things I do want to point out, since this says it's in the workflow row, and the workflow row can actually mean any of the manual rows, sometimes it can be difficult using quick search to determine where an item actually is. You don't know if this item is waiting on action from the vendor or the merchant or inventory analyst or supply chain. So to get some more information about this item, you can click the Changes tab, which is located in the very far right side of the screen. Then you can review the workflow state column. So here it says Vendor Create Review Entity. If we look over at the left, under Type it says New, and then Entities, Vendor Pack, KSM Supplier. So this looks like it's a new vendor pack. Remember, you can add new vendor packs to existing items. So in this instance, this new vendor pack is still sitting in the vendor row and it's waiting to be approved by the vendor. Okay, so I do have a scenario here. After making changes to an item, the merchant or inventory analyst keeps telling me to approve my items, but I'm pretty sure that I did. And when I do a quick search for the KSN, it shows that it's in the merchant row. Here we can see under next steps, it says entity is currently in the merchant row. The issue is that part of the item might be in the merchant row, but part of it may also be in the vendor row and requires action. So on Monday we talked about the different components or pieces of an item. There's KSN, item, vendor pack, packages, and core item. Well, whenever an item is returned from a row, usually some pieces of that item will stay in that row. So if the merchant returns it to you, the vendor, there are some pieces of that item that's going to stay in the merchant row, like the core item. It gets created by the merchant. It's never going to come back directly to you. But then some of those pieces did go back to the vendor row. The quick search screen can only tell a single row that an item is currently located in. It can't really give you a full picture of your item. It's just a snapshot of it. So this is another example where if there's some confusion where your merchant's telling you need to approve something and the quick search is telling you it's not in your role, I would encourage you to click the Changes tab. Otherwise, one of you are going to reach out to IMA Help, and you're going to have to wait on them to respond to you, and that can delay the setup of your item. So if you click the Changes tab, you'll be able to view all the pieces of your item that's in process. So here, we can see this entire item is brand new. It has not been operational yet. Everything listed on here is new. The quick search screen shows that it hasn't reached the operational status. And under workflow state, we can see that some of the pieces are in the vendor role and some of them are in the merchant role. So that would let you know that yes, you do actually have to go in and approve this item or make any changes that they had requested, but it is in your role. The merchant won't be able to continue the approval process in IMA until you do that, and that's going to hold up orders. All right, so we're going to look at a couple of different scenarios that you could see when you look at the Changes tab. Again, when it says it's in the workflow role, you don't really know what specific role that is. So if you check the Changes tab, this could be an example of what you might see. If you look under Type, it says CHG, so that means this is a change. Entity, vendor pack, so you know it's a field located on the vendor pack. Change detail, it actually lists out the change request. The cost is being changed to $27.50. And in workflow state, it says vendor review/update. So this is a change request that's pending approval in the vendor role. The merchant created this change request most likely. We do have a check and balances with some of the fields, like cost changes, because you guys have to be in agreement on the cost. So if they do a change request for the cost, it's going to come to you, and you're going to have to approve this through your role. So change requests initiated by other roles will be found in your general task list. So again, if you hover over task list and click general, that's where you're going to find change requests that are pending approval by you. So if it's newly synced vendor pack, that's going to be found in your new item data catalog task list and indicated by OPR new. So yesterday when we brought up the new item task list, we hovered over data catalog and clicked new item. If you see items are there and the type says OPR new, that means that it's just a new vendor pack for an existing item. And so when you sync over new vendor packs from your data sync provider, you still need to go into that new item task list, put those items with the new vendor packs on a grid, fill in a few fields. It's not near as many as whenever you sync over a brand new item, and then you need to approve that. Now, if you sync over any other changes, those will also be located in your data catalog task list, the new item task list, and they will be indicated by CHG. So basically, everything that gets synced over, whether it's a new item, whether it's a vendor pack, or if it's a change request, that's going to end up in your data catalog new item task list. If it's a change request initiated by a different role and it requires your approval, it's going to end up in your general task list. Okay, in this example, we can see, again, under type, this is a change request. Again, it's a cost change. Workflow state says create change request. So what that means is somebody created this change request and they saved it, but they didn't actually approve it. So it's just kind of stuck out there. So if you look at this initiator ID, you can actually get the user ID of the person that created the change request. If this is your user ID, then you need to approve this change request. And you can do that by going to the Workflow tab right here and approving. If this is somebody else's ID, then if you know who it is, let's say it's somebody else that you work with at your company, or maybe it's your buyer, you might want to reach out to them and let them know, hey, you did this change request and you saved it, but you didn't actually approve it. So they would need to either save it or, they would need to either approve it or delete it. Or if you don't recognize the user ID, you don't know who it is, you can email IMA help, and they will help get it. In this example, this item has a new vendor pack, and it's currently in the vendor role. So under Entity, we can see vendor pack, type is new, workflow states vendor create/review. Initiator says e-catalog. That means this new vendor pack was synced over. So again, to resolve this, vendor packs that have been synced over are going to be located in your new item data catalog task list indicated by OPR new. So you would just put them on a grid, complete the required fields, and approve. So any questions about utilizing the Changes tab? Okay, I didn't see any questions come across the chat, so I'm going to move on to the returned items task list. If an in-process item is returned to the vendor for updates, it's going to go to your returned items task list. So if your profile is set up correctly, you should receive an email alert when items have been returned to you. And if you aren't receiving them and would like to, you can contact IMA help at searshc.com. Otherwise, you need to be sure to go in periodically and check your returned items task list just to make sure that nothing has been returned to you. We do encourage, whenever merchants and inventory analysts go through training, we encourage them to always reach out to you to let you know whenever items have been returned. But it's always possible if there's a lot going on and they're super busy, they may have just forgotten. So it doesn't hurt to check that out periodically and make sure there's nothing pending. To access it, you hover over Data Catalog and click Returned Items. It's going to display this screen here, and you should select your paid items number and your SHC division and click Get Task List. Now, if they returned it, they returned it for a reason. So to view the reason that they returned it, you can click this Show Details link in the very far right of the screen. If you actually have it open in a browser, you may have to scroll over to the right, or it may display it all on your screen if you have, depending on how the resolution is set. But anytime something is returned, it has to have a comment along with it. So hopefully they're actually putting a helpful comment in, such as this one, update cost to $3.95, versus just entering a period or something like that in order to allow it to send it back. So if you click the Show Details, it's going to pop up with the new window. You can see the comments. And then if you agree with that, let's say update cost to $3.95. Yes, you guys renegotiated that, so you just got to reapprove it, or you got to update it and then approve it. You would select it and then do Create Grid. It's going to put it back on a grid. This time when you do a grid, you have to enter a grid name and click Save. When we did the new item grid yesterday, we did not have to enter a name. It automatically names new item grids. All of the other types of grids we're going to talk about today and tomorrow, you do have to name it and then click Save when you first create it. So again, if you agree with the comments that they included with the return, they wanted you to update the cost. So you would locate the cost by going to the Vendor Pack tab in this instance, and you can update it and click Approve. And it'll go through the approval process just like yesterday with the new item grid. Most likely, it would probably be unlikely that you would get errors at this point unless the specific fields that you changed cause an error, because you've already approved all of the fields at an earlier point in time. So any questions about the returned items task list? Okay, I'm going to move on to change existing items then. So there are a lot of changes that can actually be synced over from your data catalog provider. So this table lists all of the fields that IMA will accept from the data pool catalog to change or update item information. Now there are other fields that you may need to update that are not on this list, and that means that you cannot sync those changes over from your data catalog provider. So these are a list of all the updatable fields that you can do via the Changes grid. Changes or updates to all other fields cannot be synced over and have to be created within IMA. So whenever you start working with the Changes grid, if you've done manual change requests before where you do it one at a time, I think you're really going to like the Changes grid. It's going to save a lot of time versus doing it manually one by one. You can do multiple change requests for up to 50 items at a single time. To access the Changes grid, you hover over Data Catalog and click Change Existing Items. And real quick, I'm just doing a quick overview for this part because I'm actually going to do a demo after this, and we're going to go into IMA so I can show you in a bit more detail. You select the fields that you want to change here, and then in the second section, you can enter your specific criteria here. And you can copy and paste this from Excel or Word. Any of the fields that you see that have this up arrow and down arrow in a field, that means you can copy and paste into it. Once you enter your information, you can click Create Grid. Now, as another option, if you don't have the specific criteria, you can search for the specific items you want to do your change request for by entering information here. And then you would click Search. It's going to bring back a sample of the items that are returned. You can select the ones that you want and click Create Grid. I think it's most useful just to enter your criteria directly rather than trying to search. A lot of the times the search feature can run a little bit slow, and this way if you have the specific criteria, you know you're doing the change request for the correct items. So again, you do have to enter a grid name and click Save, and then you enter your updated changes and click Approve. So anything that you selected on that first page that you want to change, it's going to show up in your default view. It's going to be selected up at the top, and then it's going to have a green highlighted row, and that's where you can enter your updated change. And then after you've approved it, you just double check your grid history to make sure that it went through and that there are no errors. If there are errors, you do have to resolve those errors like we walked through yesterday. Do make sure when you create a change request that you remember to approve it. That's one of the biggest issues we have with both vendors and internal users. It's really easy you create that change request, you save it, and then you get distracted by something else during the day with work, and you don't realize that you didn't actually approve that change request. And it's just going to sit out there until you go back and approve it. So before we go into the demo, I wanted to do a special note with cost changes. So for Sears cost changes, those must be initiated and approved in the vendor role. Typically, the vendors initiate those. Sometimes the merchants will, but regardless, they will always come to you because they require your approval. Once you've approved the change request for the cost change, then the merchant has to approve it. For Kmart cost changes, that change is not created directly in IMA. The merchant or vendor must complete the change through the price management application. Now, some buying teams do not have their vendors working in this application, and some do. So if you're not sure, you can talk to your buyer about it and see what they would like for you to do. I did provide the link for it. And if you have questions about training for that application, I provided the email. I don't actually do anything with that application. It's completely separate from IMA. Okay, so now we are going to do a quick demo with the Changes grid. Let me grab my KSN. Okay. So when you're in IMA, again, you're going to hover over Data Catalog and click Change Existing Items. Hello? website. We'll give it a second. It's running a little bit slow. Okay, right there. Let's try it one more time. Okay, for some reason it's being a little bit slow. I know they did a deploy this morning for the QA environment. Sometimes it runs into issues whenever they do deploys. The training environment's not very stable. So it looks like maybe that's an issue, although I was in there just earlier today and it was working fine. So let me go back to this slide because there were a couple more call-outs I wanted to give you with the changes grid. So right here, when you're working on your changes grid, if you realize that you forgot to select one of your changes, let's say you wanted to do, in addition to the cost change, you also wanted to update the vendor stock number, but you forgot to select the vendor stock number and it's not showing here. You can go find any other fields that you'd like to change just by clicking on the tab that it's located on. So we know vendor stock number is located on the vendor packs tab. So if you were to click that, you could then find vendor stock number. You could select the box above it, and then it will show the green fields displayed so that you can enter the updated information. You can even go and select multiple fields from additional tabs. And then if you re-click this radio button right here next to changes, it will reload this page and it will have all of the fields that you've selected that you want to do a change request for. So they will all display here back in the default view when you click changes if you've selected additional fields. And let me see. Okay. It looks like that there is an issue from where they did the deploy this morning, so we got a go back error. So I'm not going to be able to show you that today. I'll try to fit that in tomorrow with the other material that we're doing. But I mean, it's pretty simple. If you've been doing a new item grid, then a changes grid shouldn't be too different for you, and you will find that it is much more efficient. It's much quicker with processing changes than doing them by one manually. So any questions so far on the changes grid? Okay, I'm going to move on to the data catalog notifications. The data catalog notifications page will inform you when new items fail to load during data sync. It will also notify you when changes initiated via data sync are either successful or fail. So regardless of whether they're successful or fail, anytime you do changes initiated by data sync, you're going to get a message. And the data catalog notifications page will inform you when your items have been changed or deleted by an internal role. So let's say there were 5 different styles of a shirt that your buyer was going to buy from you, and you start setting those up. They get moved into, let's say, the merchant or inventory role, and then they come back and you guys renegotiate, and now they're only taking 4 styles instead of 5. So if at some point they may delete those that extra style, and you would get a notification that that had been deleted by an internal role. To access the data catalog notifications, you can just hover over data catalog and click data catalog notifications. So on this screen, you would input or select filter criteria to focus the list. So you may have multiple divisions that you work with. So you may just want to select a single division, or you can even select a single category within that division. If you're looking for a specific UPC or shipping marking number, you can enter those here. Again, make sure that you do enter them in the right spot. UPC or the retail has to go right here. The one for the carton would have to go right here. If you reverse these, it's not going to come back with any results. You can also search by order dones. So if your company has multiple order dones that you work with, or if you're a vendor rep and you work for multiple vendors, you can select a specific order dones to review. Also on the right, you can search by entity type, the create date, so the date that you synced it over, notification code, or your vendor stock number. So the notification code and notification description provides detailed information about the status of the item submitted. So if you click the notification code icon, you can view the legend, and that's going to be right here. You will see multiple lines for a single item. That's normal. So even if you only synced over 3 items and you have quite a few more than that listed here, that's perfectly normal. So don't think that there's something wrong if you see that. So this is the notification code legend. So again, this gives you information about the items that you synced over. E1, SHC was not able to load the item into IMA, so that's for typically for a new item. E2 through E5, they all relate to change requests. It failed because of a rule violation. The change request was deleted by an internal user, it was returned by an internal user, or it was modified by an internal user. E6, delete not processed. So if a new item was deleted, or E8, delete processed, same thing. And then E7 is change is operational. So if you sync the change over and it was successful, you would get an E7 message. Notification descriptions provide specific details for item status, the reason for the outcome, and the possible corrective action. So again, those are located right here. You have your notification code on the left, and then your notification code on the right. So notification codes will be deleted after 30 days. So if you would like to delete them, if you'd like to clear this out before the 30 days, you can do that by selecting the box under the action column and then clicking remove. So if you're syncing over quite a bit in a short time span, since there's multiple lines for every item, this list could get really, really long, especially if you're doing a lot of changes that you're syncing over. So you can remove the notifications just by selecting the box and clicking remove. So any questions about the data catalog notifications? So that information can help you sometimes if you've synced over items. Sometimes it can help you with troubleshooting. I know I've said this before, but we don't have access to your data catalog providers. Those are completely different companies. So ultimately, if you can't troubleshoot it yourself, you will need to reach out to your data sync provider for assistance. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the general task list. You can access the general task list by hovering over task list and clicking general. Any change requests that are submitted by another role that require your approval will be found in this task list. You enter your paid items number and the division, and you would click Get Task List. And it will load. And just like with the Returned Items task list, you're going to want to click the Show Details hyperlink in the very far right column to view information about what the change is. So here under Type, you can see CHG, so this is a change request. It's going to pop up in that new window. We can see that there is a cost change for $40. So if you agree with whatever the change request is, you can select the box under the selection column and click Multi-Edit. Once you click Multi-Edit, you can click the Workflow tab, and it will load this page. And then you can select the radio button next to Approve and click Check for Errors / Submit Workflow Task. If there are no warnings or errors, you can click the Submit button again. So if you receive errors, they will have to be corrected before the changes can be approved. So any questions about your general task list? Alright, so some key points from today's session. Looks like we're going to wrap up pretty early, which is nice. I'll be giving you guys some time back. So first, quick search is a snapshot of an item and may not be accurate with the location of the item. View the Changes tab to view where each component of the item is located. In-process items returned to the vendor role for updates will be located in the Returned Items task list. Change requests for some fields can be synced from your data sync provider. After syncing, approve the changes from the New Item Data Catalog task list. Some fields can be updated using the Changes grid or Change Existing Items feature. Multiple change requests for up to 50 items can be done at once. Review data catalog notifications for details on items that fail to load during sync or to confirm whether changes initiated via data sync were successful or failed. And then finally, change requests submitted by another role that require vendor approval will be located in the general task list. So give me 1 second. I'm going to unmute your microphone in case you have any questions you want to ask audibly.
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay, so you're now able to talk. So do any of you guys have any questions about today's presentation or any of the features that we covered? Okay, if you don't have any questions, you can go ahead and have some time back today, and I will see you tomorrow. I'll send out the video link later today. I do hope you have a good day.